The Silent Watchers. Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cool surface of the observation deck window, watching Saturn's rings shimmer in the distance. The Titan research station had been her home for 18 months, and she never tired of the view. But today, something felt different. The deep space monitoring arrays had been picking up anomalous readings for the past week, and the patterns were too structured to be natural phenomena. The communication chamber hummed with activity as Elena made her way to the primary monitoring station. Banks of screens displayed data streams from across the solar system, each one representing humanity's ears and eyes reaching into the cosmic void. For 3 decades, the Titan facility had served as Earth's most advanced listening post, searching for signs of intelligent life among the stars. Dr. James Okafor looked up from his workstation as Elena approached. The xenolinguist had joined the team 6 months ago, bringing with him an expertise in pattern recognition that had already proved invaluable. His dark eyes reflected the glow of the monitors as he gestured toward the central display. "Commander, I think you need to see this," James said, his voice carrying an undertone of concern that made Elena's pulse quicken. "The signals we've been tracking aren't random. They're definitely artificial, and they're not coming from outside our solar system." Elena leaned closer to examine the data. The energy signatures were faint but consistent, following patterns that suggested deliberate communication rather than natural stellar activity. What troubled her most was their origin points throughout the outer solar system, hidden among asteroid fields and the debris of distant moons. "How long have these signals been active?" she asked, though part of her already suspected the answer would be unsettling. "Based on our analysis, at least 2 years," James replied. "But here's what really concerns me. We've managed to decode portions of the transmissions, and they're not trying to communicate with us. They're reporting about us." The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. Someone had been watching Earth, studying humanity, gathering intelligence. The decoded fragments that James showed her painted a picture of systematic surveillance. Population centers, military installations, technological capabilities, resource distribution, everything an invading force would need to know. Elena activated the secure communication link to Earth Command. Within minutes, she was speaking directly with Admiral Chen Williams, the head of Solar Defense Operations. Chen had always struck Elena as unflappable, but she could hear the tension in his voice as she delivered her report. "Admiral, we're not dealing with exploratory signals or peaceful contact attempts," Elena explained. "This is military reconnaissance. Someone has been preparing for invasion." The silence that followed seemed to stretch across the vast distance between Titan and Earth. When Chen finally spoke, his words carried a weight that suggested he knew more than he had previously revealed. "Commander Vasquez, I need you and Dr. Okafor to continue monitoring those signals. Document everything, but do not attempt to respond or interfere. We're activating Protocol 7 immediately." Elena felt her breath catch. Protocol 7 was theoretical, something discussed only in classified briefings. It assumed the existence of hostile alien intelligence and outlined humanity's response to imminent extraterrestrial threat. The fact that it was being activated meant Earth's leadership had been preparing for this possibility far longer than she had realized. Over the following days, Elena and James worked around the clock to decode more of the alien transmissions. What they discovered painted a disturbing picture of their watchers. The beings called themselves the Zephyrian Collective, and they had perfected a method of conquest that relied on psychological warfare and technological suppression. The Zephyrians studied their targets for years before making contact. They identified key weaknesses in technology, society, and military organization. When they finally revealed themselves, it was with overwhelming displays of superior technology designed to break the target species' will to resist. Most civilizations surrendered without a fight, believing resistance was futile. But as Elena and James delved deeper into the intercepted communications, they began to notice something unexpected. The Zephyrian reports about Earth were filled with gaps and misunderstandings. They had observed human technology and military capabilities, but they had completely missed something crucial. "James, look at this," Elena said, pointing to a decoded transmission. "They're cataloging our nuclear weapons, our space stations, even our cyber warfare capabilities. But there's no mention of the Aurora project or the quantum defense grid." James studied the data with growing excitement. "They don't know about our deep black projects. All their intelligence gathering is focused on publicly visible military assets. They have no idea what we've really been preparing." The Aurora project had been humanity's most classified military program for over a decade. Using breakthrough technologies in quantum mechanics and exotic matter manipulation, Earth had developed weapons and defensive systems that existed far beyond conventional understanding. The quantum defense grid was a network of installations hidden throughout the solar system, designed to create impenetrable energy barriers around Earth and its colonies. Elena contacted Admiral Chen with their findings. His response was immediate and decisive. "Commander, we're not going to wait for them to make the first move. Humanity has never been good at playing defense when we could take the initiative instead. It's time to introduce ourselves properly." The next phase of the operation moved with startling speed. Elena watched in amazement as hidden installations throughout the solar system came online. Massive energy signatures blazed to life on moons and asteroids that she had thought were uninhabited. The quantum defense grid revealed itself in all its glory, creating shimmering barriers of energy that could deflect any known weapon. But the most impressive display was yet to come. Dr. James Okafor had been tasked with crafting humanity's message to the Zephyrians, and he approached the task with the creativity and boldness that define the human spirit. "We're not going to plead or negotiate," James explained as he worked on the transmission. "We're going to show them exactly what they're dealing with." The message that Earth broadcast toward the Zephyrian observation posts was unlike anything the aliens had expected. Instead of the fearful response they were used to receiving, humanity delivered a comprehensive demonstration of technological capability that shattered every assumption the Zephyrians had made. The broadcast began with a simple statement in the Zephyrian language. "We know you're watching. We've been watching you too." What followed was a detailed analysis of Zephyrian technology, military tactics, and even the location of their hidden observation posts. Elena and her team had spent days preparing the data, and the message made it clear that humanity was not the primitive species the Zephyrians had assumed. The broadcast continued with live demonstrations of human defensive capabilities. The Aurora project revealed weapon systems that could manipulate matter at the quantum level, creating effects that defied conventional physics. Energy weapons capable of precision strikes across interplanetary distances fired controlled bursts that illuminated the outer solar system like fireworks. But perhaps most devastating to Zephyrian confidence was the psychological warfare component of humanity's message. James had researched every species the Zephyrians had conquered, and the broadcast included detailed records of resistance movements that were still active across their empire. "Your method of conquest relies on your targets believing they're alone and helpless," the message stated. "But we've been in contact with the survivors of your previous invasions. The Altarians still fight from their hidden bases. The Kepler resistance has never stopped striking at your supply lines. And the Vegan underground has been waiting for someone to coordinate their efforts." Elena watched the transmission being broadcast and felt a surge of pride in her species. Humanity wasn't just defending itself, it was offering hope to everyone who had suffered under Zephyrian oppression. The message concluded with an offer that was both generous and intimidating. "We're prepared to defend ourselves and our allies, but we're also prepared to talk. The choice is yours, but understand that humanity does not surrender, and we do not fight alone." The response from the Zephyrian observation posts was immediate and telling. Several of the hidden installations went dark, their occupants apparently evacuating in panic. Others began broadcasting urgent communications back toward their home territories, reporting that their intelligence about Earth had been catastrophically wrong. Elena monitored the alien communications with growing satisfaction. The Zephyrians were discovering that their intended target was actually a technological equal fully aware of their presence, and allied with resistance movements throughout their empire. The psychological advantage they relied on had been completely reversed. Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the communication system as Elena prepared her latest report. Commander, preliminary intelligence suggests the Zephyrian invasion fleet has altered course. They're not approaching Earth anymore. They're retreating to regroup. Elena smiled as she looked out at the stars. Humanity had faced its first test as a spacefaring civilization, and they had passed with flying colors. But she knew this was just the beginning. The Zephyrians would be back, and other threats might emerge from the cosmic darkness. But Earth was ready. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy, not as victims waiting to be conquered, but as a force to be reckoned with. They had turned the tables on their would-be conquerors and offered hope to the oppressed across the stars. The age of humanity's expansion into the galaxy had begun not with exploration, but with defiance. The fierce warning and its consequences. Commander Thekvar stood before the holographic display in the command center of the Zephyrian flagship, his 6 eyes studying the impossible data that had just arrived from their observation posts near Earth. In his 2 centuries of service to the collective, he had overseen the subjugation of 17 different species. None had ever detected their surveillance networks, let alone turned the tables so completely. The human transmission continued to play on repeat, and each viewing made the situation more dire. The bipedal species from the 3rd planet had not only discovered the Zephyrian presence, but had somehow gained detailed intelligence about collective military operations across multiple star systems. Most disturbing of all, they had made contact with resistance movements that the collective had believed crushed decades ago. Sub-Commander Keth 9, Analysis Report. Thekvar commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never experienced failure. The younger officer's tentacles trembled slightly as she accessed her data files. Commander, our initial assessment of human capabilities was completely incorrect. They've been masking their true technological development behind primitive public displays. Their actual military capacity rivals our own, and their defensive installations are based on quantum manipulation technologies that we don't fully understand. Thekvar's mandibles clicked in frustration. The collective's method of conquest had always relied on superior intelligence gathering. They studied their targets for years, identifying every weakness and strength before making contact. The psychological impact of revealing overwhelming technological superiority had broken the will of countless species before the first shot was ever fired. But Earth's transmission had shattered that advantage completely. The humans had demonstrated weapon systems that could threaten collective vessels, defensive technologies that could protect entire planets, and perhaps most importantly, knowledge of collective operations that should have been impossible for them to obtain. The communication console chimed with an incoming priority transmission. Thekvar activated the secured channel, expecting orders from the Collective Council. Instead, he found himself facing High Command Admiral Zeph Prime, the supreme military leader of their entire civilization. Commander Thekvar, explain to me how a species we classified as technologically primitive has just broadcast our fleet positions to resistance cells across 3 sectors. The Admiral's voice carried the cold fury of absolute authority. Thekvar struggled to maintain his composure. Admiral, the humans have been conducting a deception operation of unprecedented sophistication. They allowed us to observe their conventional military forces while hiding advanced technologies that match or exceed our own capabilities. The Admiral's image wavered as another transmission began broadcasting across collective frequencies. Elena Vasquez appeared on screens throughout the Zephyrian fleet, her human features alien, but her message devastatingly clear. To all beings suffering under collective oppression, Elena began, speaking in perfect Zephyrian common. Earth stands ready to provide technological and military support to liberation movements across the galaxy. The collective's reign of terror ends now. What followed was a detailed broadcast of collective military weaknesses, supply line vulnerabilities, and communication protocols that resistance movements could exploit. But the most damaging element was the psychological warfare component that Dr. James Okafor had crafted with surgical precision. The transmission included recorded testimonies from survivors of collective invasions, detailing the ongoing resistance efforts that the Zephyrians had convinced themselves were extinct. The Altarian underground had not only survived, but had been growing stronger for decades. The Kepler resistance controlled entire moon systems that the collective believed were pacified. Even the supposedly broken vegan population had maintained hidden military installations. Thekvar watched his crew's morale crumble as the human broadcast continued. The collective's greatest weapon had always been the belief that resistance was futile, that their technological superiority made victory inevitable. Earth's message was systematically destroying that myth. The collective tells you that resistance is hopeless. James Okafor's voice continued in the broadcast. But every tyrant in history has used that same lie. The truth is that oppression only succeeds when the oppressed believe they stand alone. Today, you learn that you are not alone. Humanity stands with you. Admiral Zeph Prime's expression had transformed from fury to something approaching fear as he processed the implications. "Commander, how many resistance cells are receiving this transmission?" "All of them, Admiral," Thekvar replied quietly. "The humans have hacked our entire communication network. This message is being broadcast to every collective territory simultaneously." The strategic situation was deteriorating rapidly. Reports began flooding in from across the collective's empire. Resistance movements that had been dormant for years were suddenly coordinating attacks on supply convoys and communication relays. Populated worlds that had seemed pacified were erupting in open rebellion, armed with intelligence about collective vulnerabilities that the humans had somehow obtained. But the most devastating blow came when Earth's transmission revealed the location and purpose of the collective's most classified installation, the central processing hub on Nexus Prime, where they analyzed intelligence from conquered worlds and planned future invasions. "They know about the hub," Admiral Zeph Prime whispered, his voice barely audible. "If the resistance movements coordinate an attack on Nexus Prime." The thought went unfinished, but both officers understood the implications. The central processing hub contained detailed plans for subjugating hundreds of species across the galaxy. If that information fell into the hands of resistance movements, the collective's expansion would not just stop. It would reverse as liberated worlds joined together to push back their oppressors. Elena Vasquez appeared again on the transmission, and this time her message was directed specifically at the collective leadership. "We know you're listening, Zeph Prime. Your invasion fleet has two choices. You can retreat to your own territories and begin negotiations for the liberation of conquered worlds, or you can continue your approach to Earth and discover exactly how fierce human resistance can be." The demonstration that followed was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Earth's quantum defense grid activated fully, creating energy barriers around the planet that pulsed with power readings that exceeded collective shielding capabilities. The Aurora project revealed weapon systems that fired controlled bursts across the solar system, demonstrating precision and range that made the Zephyrian flagship's weapons seem primitive by comparison. But perhaps most impressive was the reveal of Earth's hidden fleet. Dozens of ships that had been disguised as asteroids and space debris suddenly powered up, showing that humanity had been prepared for this confrontation far longer than anyone had suspected. Each vessel displayed technology that the collective's best scientists couldn't fully understand. Thekvar watched his tactical display as the human fleet maneuvered with perfect coordination. These weren't the actions of a species encountering space warfare for the first time. Earth had been preparing for this moment for decades, and they were demonstrating capabilities that suggested they might actually be able to back up their threats. The final element of Earth's message was an offer that was both generous and terrifying in its implications. Dr. James Okafor reappeared on the transmission, and his words carried the weight of absolute confidence. "The collective has a choice to make," he said calmly. "Continue your expansion and face not just human resistance, but a coordinated rebellion of every species you've oppressed, or begin the process of transformation from conquerors to contributors to galactic civilization. The offer included detailed proposals for technology sharing, cultural exchange, and the gradual liberation of collective territories. But it also made clear that humanity was prepared to lead a galactic resistance movement if the Zephyrians chose to continue their aggressive policies. Admiral Zeph Prime made his decision with the speed that had made him the collective's supreme military leader. Commander Thekvar, order the invasion fleet to alter course. We're returning to collective space. Admiral, the Council will demand an explanation for our retreat, Thekvar pointed out. Then we'll give them one, Zeph Prime replied grimly. We'll tell them that we've encountered the first species capable of not just resisting the collective, but potentially destroying it, and we'll recommend that they seriously consider the human proposal for negotiation. The Zephyrian fleet began its long journey home, leaving Earth's solar system for the first time in years without hostile alien presence. But the consequences of humanity's fierce warning continued to ripple across the galaxy. Within days, resistance movements across collective space had begun coordinating their efforts using the intelligence Earth had provided. Supply lines were disrupted, communication networks were compromised, and the myth of collective invincibility was shattered beyond repair. On Earth, Elena Vasquez watched the tactical displays showing the alien fleet's retreat with a mixture of relief and anticipation. Humanity had won this round, but she knew it was just the beginning. The galaxy now knew that Earth was not a target to be conquered, but a force to be reckoned with. Dr. James Okafor was already working on the next phase of the operation. Earth's message had offered the collective a choice between conflict and cooperation, but it had also established humanity as the leader of a potential galactic alliance. Species across the galaxy were reaching out, seeking partnership with the beings who had dared to challenge the seemingly invincible Zephyrian Empire. Admiral Chen Williams stood in the command center of Earth's primary defense installation, watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. Humanity had not just defended itself, it had sparked a revolution that would transform the balance of power among the stars. We did it, Elena said quietly as she joined the Admiral. We turned their own tactics against them, and showed the galaxy that resistance isn't futile. Chen nodded, but his expression remained serious. This is just the beginning, Commander. We've made enemies today, but we've also made allies. The real work of building a better galaxy starts now. Earth had announced itself to the cosmic community not as supplicants seeking acceptance, but as leaders offering hope to the oppressed and opportunity to the enlightened. The age of humanity's influence among the stars had begun with a fierce warning that shattered plans for conquest and opened the door to unprecedented cooperation. The galaxy would never be the same.